Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. That's very strange. I thought I started the music there. Now I'm not so certain. Let me try this. There we go. Let's listen to the music. Hello, everyone. I want to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. We're going to be talking about the Billy Meier case this evening. Edward Albert Meier is a 77-year-old farmer from Switzerland who's had extraterrestrial contact since he was about 5 years old. I just want to say hello to Judith there in the chat room real quick. Welcome to the show. And he grew up as a young boy in Bulak, Switzerland, and he would get these telepathic messages from an extraterrestrial man named Svath. And eventually, Billy went out into play in the forest, and he was looking at some fish swimming in a stream, and lo and behold, this pear-shaped craft comes out of the air, and Svath walks over to Billy, leads him back into the ship, and Svath told Billy that he would have much suffering in his life. And in fact, that was true. Even at a young age, Billy became somewhat of a scapegoat in the village, and he was punished very intensely by his father. Billy kept having these contacts with Svath, and he also skipped school a lot. Svath told Billy that he would have a most difficult mission and that he was selected for this mission before he came into this life. And around the time of these first contacts, Billy was about 5 years old, but about 4.5 years before that, when Billy was just 6 months old, Billy had this deadly pneumonia, and he was going to die, and the doctors basically said that young Billy was going to die from this pneumonia. And Svath healed the young boy. I don't know how he did it. I don't know if he came into his home there or what he did, but he did heal Billy at a very, very young age. So they had this relationship for a while. Billy, again, met Svath in the forest there in Bulak and led Billy into the ship, and Svath took Billy some 70,000 meters into the air. And again, Svath's ship was an unusual shape. It was a pear-shaped craft. Another thing interesting about Svath is he spoke to Billy not only in German, but in the specific dialect that was native to his village. And Billy was told to sit down in a special chair there in the ship, and there were small screens that Billy could see on the walls of the ship, and young Billy could see the people below the ship because the ship was very high at this point. And Billy, at this young age of like 5 years old, in many ways was already up to the development of a 35-year-old man. And Svath told Billy that Billy would get a new teacher before too long because Svath was coming to the end of his life here. And Svath told Billy that the people of the earth were entering into this very dangerous time called the third millennium. So Svath placed this device on Billy's head that had all these strange wires associated with it. And when Svath put this device on Billy's head, he started to transmit it wasn't so much transmitting knowledge to Billy. It was waking up knowledge from Billy's previous lives. And Svath explained that certain abilities were awakened within Billy because of this instrument. And these were abilities that Billy had developed in previous lifetimes. And they would help him in this difficult mission during this time in his life. And it would also, this device would protect Billy from people that might try to force their way into his mind for various reasons. Now, Billy's other personalities and other lifetimes had done similar work here on the earth, and Billy was told that he entered life as an announcer of the laws of creation. So this was Billy's first contact. So what is creation? What is the universal consciousness that Svath is talking about? The universal consciousness is a neutral positive entity. It builds universes as a part of its own evolution. It's neither good nor evil. It is not immutable. It's not perfect. It's evolving. Its wisdom is immeasurably higher than ours. But it evolves, and it is evolving. And one of the ways that the creation evolves, this universal consciousness, is through human reincarnation. And the human spirit is a creation of creation in order to help it evolve to another higher level. The spirit, the human spirit, is also referred to as a spirit form. It's indestructible. It lives eternally. It's a loving entity. It resides deep within your brain in the superior colliculus, it's called. Your human spirit is no bigger than the end of a needle. And the energy from that human spirit goes out through all your body like a filigree, like a web. It animates your entire body. And the spirit energy brings life into every cell in your human body. Now, the human spirit enters the body of the embryo 21 days after the sperm fertilizes the egg. Before the human spirit comes in, the embryo doesn't even have a personality. What comes down when the human spirit is placed in the body, something called the consciousness block comes down as well. And the consciousness block ensures that you get a new personality in every reincarnation. And a reincarnation is a part of the normal process of human life. So we've had many, many thousands of lifetimes. And before that embryo has the human spirit, it's evolving based on impulse evolution. When the human spirit comes in, then consciousness evolution starts. The consciousness block also takes all the wisdom of your predecessor personalities and places those in the subconscious of the child. So as the child grows back up, he will receive inspiration from his previous personalities and impulses from the storage banks. I have a clip on reincarnation here. I'll play a little bit of it, and then we'll continue with our discussion about the human spirit.
This little boy is referred to as Sam in case studies. A year and a half before he was born, his grandfather died.
When he was about 18 months old, his dad was changing his diaper one day, and Sam looked up at him and said, "When I was your age, I used to change your diaper."
Since 1996, Dr. Jim Tucker, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, has been gathering case studies of past life recognition in children that could prove that a soul returns to Earth in another body.
We've now got 2,500 cases in our files from all over the world.
Many people believe in some form of reincarnation. The concept dates back to 800 BC and the Hindu Upanishads. Beginning in India, the belief that some essential part of ourselves may return after death to a new body is now being examined by some scientists as another way to prove the survival of consciousness. Can the study of past life recollections support this theory? The answer may lie within young children's memories.
Very young children, usually between the...
So typically we don't recall our past lives. At this level of our evolution here on the Earth, at higher evolutionary stages, we'll have more and more recall of those previous lives. Here on the Earth, we're called a stage 2 society. And we start out as primitive societies, we move to stage 2, which is rational life. The third stage is intelligent life. The fourth stage is real life. The fifth stage is life and creational wisdom. Now, at that point, we start to have much, much more recall of our previous lives. But right now, all that recall is kind of, it can kind of serve to confuse us. But anyway, let's pick back up in our clip here.
His colleague, Jim Tucker, still uses this method.
The criteria we use to decide whether to register a case would include two of the following characteristics: a prediction of rebirth, an announcing dream, a birthmark or birth defect that seems related to the previous life, statements of memories about the previous life, behaviors that seem related, and then also recognitions of people or places from that life.
Sam's story is an example of how a small child may express what some believe are memories of a previous life.
When Sam was 4 and a half, his grandmother died, and his father went out to take care of her belongings. When he came back, he brought a group of family photos, which before that, Sam's family had not had any of his father's family photos in the house. One night, Sam's mom had them spread out on the coffee table looking at them when Sam came over and started pointing to pictures of his grandfather.
Mommy, where did these come from?
Those are pictures Daddy brought back from Grandma's funeral.
That's my car.
Let me see that picture.
So anyway, the young boy in this clip is evidently a reincarnation of the father's father, and he recognized the grandfather's car, which was his car in a previous life. Now, in terms of reincarnation, I wanted to mention something about the people at the FIGU. There are two of the FIGU members, which are the people in Switzerland, named Bernadette and Engelbert. And it's interesting to note that according to some of the contact notes I've been studying recently, they have had a friendship during previous lives. And it's interesting to note that according to this contact, friendships can span multiple lifetimes. So here is a record where two people have met and were friends in earlier lifetimes. They first met each other a few centuries ago as other personalities, and they became quite good friends, but they never had closer relations before, and they had never actually had a romantic relationship or anything like that. But anyway, it's interesting to note here from the Meier material, they're explaining that some of these people in the group there in Switzerland have worked together in previous lifetimes. So let's pick back up in our clip.
Heaven, things like that. Some of them will talk about seeing other beings there or talking with God.
I died and shot up to heaven. God gave me a ticket that let me come back down to earth.
This is not part of our everyday experience to have people talking about past lives. If the children are able to describe memories that then turn out to be accurate for somebody who lived and died in the past, then this suggests that memories or something connected with memories can carry over possibly after the death of the body. I've had a number of friends and acquaintances who have said that their children, when they were 2 or 3, would make one sort of unusual statement. Like there's one woman who said her child said, "In my last life, I drove a big truck." This was as they were riding down the road one day. Never said anything else. And, you don't make too much of that. But in these cases, the children don't stop after 1 or 2 statements.
When children continue to talk about having had a past life, they may offer more specific details.
Do you remember your family?
Now, Billy's past lives, he had been the following personalities here on the earth. He has been Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. Actually, there were 3 Enochs that the Meier material refers to as Henoch. The most important one of those personalities was born in 8,903 BC, and he gave us the Henoch prophecies, which are very important prophecies about our current time. And one of them, the most dire prophecies, says that in the North American continent, nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons will be released and run outside of human control, because these weapons will be released by automated systems. And this will be the greatest disaster in recorded history. Let's pick back up with our clip on reincarnation.
So one of the things we code for is the parent's initial attitude about a case. And when I looked, I found that, in fact, the initial attitude has no correlation whatsoever with how strong the case ultimately appears to be.
Memories aren't the only signs of a former life. In Dr. Tucker's cases, a more rare occurrence is when physical characteristics carry over from one body to another, from one life to the next.
In a number of our cases, the child is born with a birthmark or a birth defect that matches a wound, usually a fatal wound, on the body of the previous person. This is something that's fairly common. Most of these are not the usual blemishes that a lot of people have, but they can be quite specific or unusual markings. There's a little boy in Thailand named Chloe. When his grandmother was dying, she expressed a wish to come back as a man. And then when she died, her daughter-in-law took some white paste and ran her finger down the back of the neck of the body. Then Chloe was born a few years later and had this white mark on the back of his neck that looked just like someone running a finger down the back of his neck. Then when he got old enough to talk, he talked about having been his grandmother, said how her rice field belonged to him, and made statements like that.
A common practice in several Asian countries involves marking the dying relative with soot or paste. When the soul is reincarnated...
Anyway, people do change sex during reincarnation, and that's one of the very, very incredible, bizarre things about reincarnation. Now, we reincarnate for millions of years, even billions of years. And in his book, The Psyche, Billy says the oldest spirits here on the earth are very young, and the oldest spirits are between 8 and 12 million years old. So as you grow back up as a child, you'll get inspiration from your predecessor personalities that comes through your subconscious, and you'll get impulses from the storage banks. And that's the way wisdom builds one lifetime on top of another. And eventually, once we evolve to a high enough level, we'll have more and more past life recall. I wanted to also talk about something, one of the chemicals involved in aging, and the Plarion call this lecitron. It's a very specific acid that forms in the brain, and in their language they call it lecitron. The acid is responsible for the aging process. It already begins to form in the brain of a human being as soon as we reach the full human body function in the pregnant womb. So this aging starts in the womb. Nevertheless, the formation of this acid at this point in time still takes place in a tiny amount that's very, very tiny, practically cannot be analyzed. With the progressive age of the life form, however, the brain's own production of the lecitron acid increases, which, as I said, is genetic, by what means an aging process of the physical body begins, which lasts for decades and or centuries. In the case of the Plejaren, they live 1,000 years or so. And there are human life forms on other worlds that live more than 1,000 years. I think some as high as 10,000 years. It's pretty amazing. But the lecitron acid forms in itself a special and split off form of the normal acid matter, but in such a small quantity that it can only be held and analyzed by very technical, precise devices. The lecitron acid, however, they say we will be able to detect this soon with our science, and once we do, we'll be able to slow down the production of this lectronic acid, and this will happen in the next several years. I think I have a clip on aging somewhere, and this is by this fellow named Roger Heskey, who calls himself the 44-year-old teenager. I thought it would be fun to play this. It's just some clips on how to fight aging.
Hi, this is Roger Heska, the 44-year-old teenager, coming to you from the Big Island of Hawaii, and I will share with you my 3 most powerful and unusual anti-aging strategies. The first one has to do with exercise, but not just any exercise. You need to do vigorous, heart-pounding exercise. The problem with doing stuff like aerobics, especially long-distance running like marathons and ultramarathons, a lot of those guys end up looking prematurely old, aging themselves. Instead, what you want to do is something really vigorous, and there are many kinds of exercises, but one of them that I'll suggest to you today is doing some kind of sprinting, and not just a little jogging, sprinting up hills. Any chance you get, run as fast as you can. And what happens is, if you do this properly, you can release up to 500% more human growth hormone into your body, which helps you to look younger, look slimmer, and so on. So that's anti-aging tip number 1, is vigorous exercise. Number 2 is eat a lot more raw fruits and vegetables. What scientists have discovered through many studies and correlations of the people who ended up living the longest in these studies, they found that the number 1 most important food for anti-aging is dark, mineral-rich leafy greens. The second most important food, or the people who live the longest, were also eating a lot of raw fruit. And what I eat is a raw food diet. I've been eating it for over 10 years, actually for about 15 years, but pretty much exclusively for over 10 years now, which consists of raw fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. And I found...
So diet and exercise can play a role in helping us with our aging so we don't age too quickly. Let's take a short little break, just a minute or two, listen to a little music, and then we'll be back talking about the Billy Meier case and why it's important to us. You're listening to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. We'll be right back. Hello, everyone. I want to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I want to say hello to Soul Connection Judith Williams. Thanks, guys. And we've got a couple anonymous guests in. Always good to see you guys in the chat room. I wanted to talk a little bit about Billy's public mission, which began in the mid-70s when Billy met with a woman named Semyasi. Semyasi, I believe, was 344 years old when she first met with Billy. She was halfway to becoming what they call a queen of wisdom, or an Ishrish. And she would land her ship there near Hinterschmidruti in the valleys or on these rolling hills. And in the very beginning, before Billy became world famous, she could walk right over to Billy and sit down underneath a tree there and have these profound discussions with Billy. And she would often speak in very poetic terms. And she would say things like, love and wisdom go together, and that the creation and its laws are love and wisdom at the same time. And she would talk about the human spirit and say that every human has within them a spirit that does not die, it does not sleep, that records all his thoughts and actions, that will tell him if his thinking is right or wrong, if he has learned to pay attention to it. Semyase also said that within each human is the seat of the infinite, but few are aware of it, and that it takes freedom from unreal teaching and sound logic to wake up the infinite in each of us. And waking up the infinite helps us in our goal, which is the goal of our life, kind of a spiritual perfection. And that's why we have many, many, many lifetimes in order to perfect ourselves spiritually. And Semyase said that those who are rich in spirit will become an instrument through which the creation can reveal the spiritual realms. Now, when we die, this human spirit comes out of the body and enters into what some people call the fine matter world, the spiritual realms, and the universal consciousness will take our previous life memories and store those in the storage banks. And then at the appropriate time, again, the human spirit is placed back into the body of a child. 21 days after the sperm fertilizes the egg, the consciousness block ensures that we get a new personality, and all of the wisdom of our predecessor personalities is placed into the subconscious mind. And this is a process that goes on and on and on. And as the child grows back up again, he gets the inspiration from the subconscious, from the predecessor personalities, and the impulses come down from the storage banks. And this is the way, over lifetime after lifetime, that we grow in wisdom. One thing that Semyase told Billy is that the human, everything is within the human. And she described human beings as a microcosm within the macrocosm. And what that means, I think, is that at the smallest levels, repeating patterns in nature. For example, we have electrons rotating around the nucleus of an atom, and then on the level of the solar system, you see planets rotating around stars. We see the branching pattern in our circulatory system in our body, the same kind of branching pattern in branches of trees, repeating patterns at the small level and at the large level. And the human being is just a representation of creation's repeating patterns. We see the spiraling arms of the galaxy. You see the spiraling in our DNA. You see the spiraling in the seashells. So we have these repeating patterns. And fractals can be found in trees and the spiral again in the seashell. And this fractal is a natural phenomenon that occurs. And in some ways, our human spirit is like a fractal of the universal consciousness. Just a microcosm within a macrocosm. And that's the way Semyase explained the human spirit, and she compared it to this universal consciousness. Now, the universal consciousness isn't God. The Meier material says there is no God in the way our religions handle the term. The universal consciousness is love and wisdom at the same time. It radiates love, but it doesn't have this personal relationship with you. You are responsible for your own evolution. You're completely responsible for your own evolution. The universal consciousness radiates love. In fact, Billy explained it this way. He said the incredible splendor of nature is the visible expression of the love of creation. And you should be able to look at a tree and see this principle of love. Everything follows this principle of love in creation. Every tiny plant, every tiny animal fulfills its purpose in creation. But creation isn't taking care of you. You're responsible to take care of yourself. So the universal consciousness isn't a father figure watching over us, taking care of us. It takes the human spirit, places it in a material body, and that's when you get to take over. And one of the things that we have to learn here on the earth is personal responsibility. We have a mindset that has been shaped by religions, and it's given us a kind of a disorientation to reality. Now, there's a book, it's called Om Fallen Marado, or the OM, and it explains God this way. It says, the gods of the earth were human. They came from the depths of space, from other star systems, and they unrightfully set themselves up above the earth humans. And they demanded worship, and they created religions. And they did really horrific things at times. Some of these quote-unquote gods committed murders, and much of the confusion here on the earth is because of what happened in these ancient times. So now the notion of God has bled over into our age. And the Meier material explains that the universal consciousness is what Billy calls a Wesenheiten. It's a pure energetic being. It doesn't even think, not the way we think. It doesn't. Its intellectual activity is not even thinking the way we consider thinking. The universal consciousness, in some ways, is closer to water and gas and energy and things like that. So it's not this anthropomorphic being with a big white beard that's watching over you. We are put into physical bodies and we're given a spirit. Now, your human spirit is invulnerable. It cannot be harmed by anything within physical reality. And you have something in your human spirit called the gamut, which controls your spirit-based thoughts and feelings. We have spirit-based thoughts and feelings as well as material-based thoughts and feelings. The thoughts and feelings associated with our psyche are material-based. So we're kind of two creatures at once, in a way. We have a spiritual body. The gamut controls our thoughts and feelings in the spiritual body. Your human spirit will never become insane. It will never have a nervous breakdown. Those kind of problems occur in the human psyche. See, your gamut is an amazing thing. In fact, it harnesses something called the swinging wave. And the swinging wave is what brings the incredible power associated to human thinking. When we, and probably we're going to start showing these abilities very shortly, we will get the ability where we can do telekinesis. We can move things with our mind. We will be able to do telepathy. We'll be able to look into the future, look into the past. These quote-unquote gods that came to the earth in ancient times could do all these things. And we will evolve back once again to that level if we don't destroy ourselves and destroy the planet first. Now, Semyase explained that life is a teaching of the Spirit for the Spirit. And she talked about something called the material intellect. And she warned us about material intellectual thinking. And she explained that egoism and pride and lust for adventure and worries and all of these kind of thoughts created what she called materialistic intellectual thinking. And these thoughts are unproductive. In the book, The Might of Thoughts, Billy explains that we have to cultivate our thoughts. Just like you weed a garden and take the weeds out, we have to reach in, identify those thoughts which are unproductive, and pull them out by the roots. Because if we don't, these unbalanced thoughts can run wild in our psyche and create mental illness. Now, your human spirit will never become ill, but your material consciousness can experience much sadness from these thoughts that run outside of our control. It's just like weeds in your garden. You have to self-examine yourself, just like you look at your garden and you identify the weeds and you pull the weeds up. You got to do that with your psyche. You have to go through the process of self-examination. Do you have a thought that keeps repeating in your mind that's causing you great misery? Well, you have to turn off that thought, because if you let those thoughts run too far, they can create big problems. Now, the German term is Asartung. Asartung is my best pronunciation. It means to get very badly out of control of the good nature. We have a good nature. that's based on neutral, positive thinking. Not too positive, because that leads to unbalance, and not too negative. And the human being has to learn to direct his thoughts in a balanced way so he can stay balanced in his psyche. And the might of the thinking, every human being, is the key to our personal power in all things. And the human, we have to stop doing things which we don't want to do. We do things without knowing why. And that's because we've allowed these unwanted weeds to grow in our consciousness that negatively affect our thought processes. We have to plant good seeds into our consciousness to spring forth good thoughts. And when we get more good thoughts, our life stabilizes, and our thoughts can have a tremendous power when we learn the might of thoughts. One of the ways that we can help our thoughts is learning to control our thoughts. A way to learn to control your thoughts is through meditation. It's learning the skill to clear your mind, learning the skill to relax. That's one of the most important skills that you can learn, is learning to relax. And then after you've learned to relax, to learn to clear your mind. And you have to take a little time and work just a few minutes during the day. Close your eyes and get in a relaxed position. Take several deep breaths. Learn to release all of that negative energy that's been building up. What I typically do is I think of three colors. I go green, yellow, red. Green, imagine rolling hills. You can imagine blue for a blue sky. You can imagine yellow, a sun, and then red, a rose, and then focus on that image of a red rose in your mind. Long enough, just focus on that for a minute or two until all other thoughts release from your mind and you get into a very, very relaxed state. Now, if you get into a deep enough relaxed state, you can just kind of stay there and you'll drift off almost into a sleep. Another way to help you with relaxing is stretching. And I don't know if anyone does yoga. I don't do yoga, but I have developed a stretching routine because we store a lot of stress within our bodies, a lot more than we realize. So if you can go through a little bit of a stretch routine, sometimes that can help you before you meditate. The point is, we're trying to get back to a state of peace, a state of relaxation, a state of balance that the Meier material calls neutral, positive balance. I'm going to play a clip from a guy named John Kabat. John Kabat-Zinn. Not everything he says lines up perfectly with the Meier material, but I think it gives us some good information related to meditation.
Well, I have a lot of different responses to that question, what meditation really is. But I would say that meditation is living your life as if it really mattered. And that means you got to be here for it, with awareness and with a certain degree of kindness towards oneself and an understanding of the deep interconnectedness of all life and all beings. So that's something that understanding doesn't come from here. It comes from directly connecting with the totality of your being. And the first foundation of mindfulness is the body. So that's a wonderful place to start. And so if we could just learn to tune into our own bodies and see how responsive and dynamical they are in relationship to other people, to various changing circumstances in our lives and in our own minds and so forth, then we would be able to live a life that is a kind of embodiment of clarity, wisdom, kindness, and well-being. And it's not some kind of Mount Everest that we have to climb. It's closer than close. It's in this very moment. It's in this very breath. That if there's any liberation at all on the planet, it's already here as potential. And our job, so to speak, or the calling of meditation, is to learn how to see the actuality behind the veil of appearance and learn how to inhabit that dimensionality of our being that we so much ignore or take for granted. So there are lots of hidden dimensions to being human. And as we uncover them, we live much bigger and fuller and less self-centered lives. And one of the most obvious of those hidden dimensions, but nevertheless remains totally hidden, even to meditators for long stretches of time, is the present moment. The only moment that we ever are alive in, and yet most of the time we're off someplace else in the past or in the future. And scheming, what we like, what we don't like, what we want to get rid of, what we want to acquire. And all of this is in some sense just my thumbnail encapsulation, living life as if it really mattered. If you only had 36 hours left to live, probably a lot of the things that we worry about would fall away. So why not?
So anyway, taking control of our thoughts, learning to relax, is part of the very important ideas regarding meditation. Now, Billy has a book called Meditation from Clear Visibility. And one of the things that book describes, it says, belief is a path to destruction and de-evolution, and it leads to insanity and confusion as well as a perturbed consciousness. The meditative thoughts and feelings are cultivated again and again by thinking, or you can even mutter certain things several times a day, 3 or 4 times a day. A specific sentence you can repeat for about 5 minutes. Now, I haven't done this much yet. I'm just now starting this. There are 2 sentences. There's 77 sentences that the Meier material says are good for repeating, and I'll just give a couple explanations of those. 2 of the sentences that I like. One of them is, everything is achievable for me, and I master whatever I wish to accomplish. Everything is achievable for me, and I master whatever I wish to accomplish. And here's the other one. I always remain relaxed and thereby gain might over myself. I always remain relaxed and thereby gain might over myself. So those are 2 phrases that you can focus on and meditate with. Remember, meditation is a form of concentration that leads to control of your mind. Most of the worries of the world that we have are created by illogical thinking. By controlling our thinking, we control both our physical and mental health. By learning meditation, we will develop what's called the meditation concentration. Meditation can be a method of creating balance between negative and positive thinking. This state of balance is called neutral thinking. The universal consciousness is a neutral, positive entity. What we're doing is syncing our thoughts up with the universe when we get into a neutral, balanced state of mind. In fact, when we're in a meditative state, we are really in a form of observation and relaxation. As we mature, sometimes we realize we're not in control of our thoughts. And this can lead to depression, anger, anxiety, negative feelings. They start to rule our lives. People have different meditation techniques. I describe one of my meditation techniques. Some people concentrate on a flame. Sometimes I'll go outside and sit in a chair. I live on top of a hill and I can see a lot of beautiful trees everywhere, and I'll just listen and relax. Breathing is important. You can release a lot of negative energy by deep breathing. That'll help bring the body into a relaxed state. You want to keep your conscious mind as clear of all thoughts as possible. Sometimes images will come in. You don't want to be influenced by outside energies. So find a place that's quiet and comfortable. Close your eyes. Sometimes that will help. Close your eyes. Focus on the sides of your nostrils. As unwanted thoughts come into your mind, learn to control them. Stop thinking those unwanted thoughts. Go back into observation mode. And learning to concentrate will help us take control of our thinking process. Meditation is going to allow us to control our day-to-day thinking, and eventually it will give us access to higher spiritual powers. I've experienced things in meditation where I maybe have a technical problem that I have to solve at work, and I've been stuck on it. By going into a deep state of meditation, somehow the answer's just there. And I think a lot of times it's learning to relax and learning that state of relaxation. And once we connect back again with the spirit, then that helps a great deal. Now, I was talking about meditation and controlling our thinking. I want to talk about love and what love really is. Billy explains that love is realizing our connection to all things. That love is not an emotion-based thing. That's a false form of love. And that emotion-based love is subject to very wild fluctuations. But what we should have, is a wisdom-based love that's very stable, and that's based on observation. Now, often I quote from the Goblet of Truth. There is a paragraph in the Goblet of Truth that says, what the truth knows to say. And it goes on and explains that rivers, lakes, streams, the earth, bushes, trees, everything that crawls and flies on the earth is a spirit form. It's a life form with a spirit form. And these spirit forms are on a journey through time which involves many, many lifetimes. And that death is just the passage to rebirth. Rebirth into the world of pure spirit. And that many of these creatures are connected by psychic vibrations, and they're aware of each other. And they're all part of a tightly woven, indissoluble web of life where no life form tries to set itself above others of its own kind. Now, if you go into the forest, and it's another aspect of lifestyle that I think I recommend for everyone listening to this show. Take the time to go into the forest to experience Empfinden. And Empfinden is starting to sense the radiating love of creation. Empfinden is a purely spiritual process that's associated with your spirit body. When you become aware, you'll hear the crickets, you'll hear the birds, you'll hear the cicadas, you'll hear the frogs, you'll hear all the aspects of creation as they communicate with one another. You see, they communicate through these psychic vibrations. The psychic vibration comes from your gemut, which is the counterpart to your material psyche. The power of your thoughts streams in from the universe itself through the gemut. Now, every plant, every tiny animal fulfills its purpose in creation. You have a purpose in creation. I have a purpose in creation. We all need to take the time to go back into creation and reconnect and feel the energies of these living creatures. Go into the forest near the evening time and listen. Listen to the cacophony of all these creatures as they communicate with one another. Eventually, you'll start to observe creational natural laws, like the birds moving together as a unit, sensing what the other ones are doing. The same way you'll see the creative natural laws at work when the fish swim together in the lake or in the stream. You see, we're part of this indissoluble, interconnected web of life. And by reconnecting with your human spirit through meditation, you'll be able to sense these kinds of things. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight, is the importance of meditation. This is kind of a subject I've covered in the past before, meditation, and I don't cover it enough. We'll get back to meditation in a few minutes, but I thought it might be good just to take a little bit of a music break, and we'll be right back. You're listening to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. Hello, everyone. I want to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. I want to thank After Dark Radio, Judith Williams, Carrie Collision, Soul Connection. And looks like we got one anonymous guest out there. Thanks for joining me. Hopefully I didn't lose too many people during the break. But I thought it was a good time for a break. We've been talking a little bit about meditation. And this is another interesting clip on meditation. It talks about this amazing little boy in India who could meditate all day long, day after day after day. They called him the Buddha boy.
To follow him into the inner sanctum.
The boy belongs to Jigu Buddhist monastery, which is in India, in Himachal Pradesh. And that monastery belongs to the Sakya tradition of Tibetan Buddhism.
Very little is known of Sakya, one of the 4 Buddhist traditions. Its leaders keep their teachings a closely guarded secret.
Buddha's teaching or our practice is not for your fame, not for your reputation, not to collect so many disciples. We usually don't expose much. We have another meditator. He has been doing this for the last 30 years. Today, his hairs are so long that he can't stretch down, so he put the small back hanged behind and then put all the hairs into that.
To endure solitary existence in extreme conditions, yogic techniques enable you to focus your mind over your body's suffering.
Obviously, if he's genuine, has to use some yogic techniques like feeding on the air, feeding on the breath. There are other techniques where you use a stone, a little stone that you put in your mouth, and you feed on the stone. There are all those stories. They are documented in the literature, in Buddhist literature.
To understand what type of yogic technique Ram is practicing from the Sakya tradition of teaching, the Lama sits and stares at the boy.
I'm amazed by this immense, the intensity of his determination. He told his mother that he was going to sit there for 6 years and reach Buddhahood, which is very rare. I mean, nobody says that,
They sit facing each other for more than an hour in what seems to turn into a meditation duel. Sweat starts to form on Ram's face despite a lack of movement and an air temperature of only 15 degrees centigrade.
To suddenly start pouring sweat from the face is a very strange phenomenon. He's managing to control his body's physiological process, which no one has demonstrated before. It's not something you ever see in Western society, and so how that's been controlled is beyond my level of knowledge.
When he was sitting down, I was doing my meditation. Actually, I was competing, and that the sweat came down.
Okay, so why did you sweat?
No, it's a secret thing I don't want to tell you right now.
Anyway, interesting example of meditation. And meditation is related to love. So the knowledge and wisdom acquired this way through meditative concentration on the reality of a thing results in the experience of love. However, the ability to exercise such concentrative observation is something we Earth humans rarely possess, and therefore we must develop it through hard, ongoing practice, often over a period of years. So learning to control your thinking, again, is like self-examination. It's like your consciousness is like a garden. If you pay attention to your garden, pull those weeds out, the weeds which tangle up your thoughts and cause confusion. In fact, in the beginning, in the dedication to the book called The Might of Thoughts, Elizabeth Moosberger wrote this dedication, and she says, "So the book which lies before you is dedicated to a humankind that is ill in its consciousness." And Semyase said the same thing. She described the Earth humans as an insane society rushing headlong to our own destruction. And Svath told Billy that in World War II, when we dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we entered into an age called the Third Millennium. And in the Third Millennium, our leaders would start to become megalomaniacal. And they would start to take the rights of self-determination of people away. And that's what we've seen here in the Third Millennium. We see things like the National Defense Authorization Act, which takes away your rights to a fair trial. They can now legally put us in jail for whatever reason through the NDAA, which is another one of these executive orders which has come down from this administration. And this corruption in our leadership goes way back, probably all the way to Kennedy. Kennedy was probably our last real president. And certain people from the military are starting to step up now and see this megalomaniacal leadership, which Billy prophesied would occur. And he talked about this many, many years ago when he was writing books like The Goblet of Truth and other books. Anyway, here's Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters comparing Vladimir Putin to the current leadership in the United States.
The bottom line on this is Russia has a real leader. May not like him, and I don't, but he is brilliant and ruthless. He has clear goals, and he moves straight toward those goals. The West lacks a leader. Like it or not, the President of the United States is the de facto leader of the West, and our President just is he's incapable and unwilling to lead. The weakness is phenomenal. Now, we are not as weaker than we were in the Carter years. I was in that military. It was pathetic. Our military today is the best in the world, best in our history, although Obama wants to dismantle it. We're also immensely wealthier than the Carter years. The problem is that as a president, Obama is far weaker than Carter, and he's probably the worst president we've ever had. He is a man who's incapable of making a hard decision. And by the way, one other key point. Vladimir Putin believes in Russia. He believes in Russia's destiny, its mission. Obama does not believe in American exceptionalism. He does not believe
hang on.
in this country.
Hang on. That is a powerful commentary. KT gets the last word.
Yeah, I think he's absolutely right.
In the third millennium, in Billy's book called The Goblet of Truth, it says, "Your greed for profit, you human beings of earth, is continuing to abound more and more. And those of your world, you have cast your populations into ever deeper states of misery, making imperious and megalomaniacal decisions over their heads, and taking all the might of determination away from your people." And it says also in the Goblet of Truth that in the third millennium that the people of the earth will become indolent, lazy. They will become obtuse. It will be hard for them to think things through clearly. And they will become indifferent. They will become ambivalent. They will be disinterested. They will be so focused on their own little world. It's explained this way. Let me read here. It says, "Therefore you are becoming ever more indifferent to one another." And you see that today. People are always looking at their cell phones. Indifferent, always. More mistrustful of one another. And people are becoming emotionless, disinterested, indolent, obtuse in their interpersonal relationships. And this is causing simple human connections to be destroyed, families to be ruined, and under such unbearable circumstances, certain people will react with blazing anger, and they'll torment their fellow human beings and try to extract bloody revenge on them. And, we've seen some of this bloody revenge in some of these Ferguson shootings. It's a horrible, horrible thing. I'll just play this clip. I won't play the whole thing. It's just too disturbing. We've heard it enough, I'm sure. But this is what's prophesied. It also says in the Enoch prophecies, and this is a prophecy, not a prediction, that the United States could face 2 civil wars, and it could be broken up into 5 different areas. So let's once again remind ourselves what just happened in St. Louis.
The police finna pull up. Y'all call the police? He's bagging up. He got his gun out. Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh shit. They got their guns out. Oh my God. They just killed him. Oh, here we go again. They just killed this man.
Anyway, we've entered into the third millennium as described by the Meier material, when people will feel blazing anger rise up in them, and they'll torment one another, they'll extract bloody revenge on one another. We may be facing potential civil wars here in the United States, and I urge everyone to work on your spiritual life, to reconnect with nature, to learn thought control, and to learn what true love is. It's understanding the connectivity we have for all things. And in Contact Report 72, which Larry Driscoll recently translated for me, it talks about a time that's coming over the world when confusion and maliciousness will slowly spread over the world. So humanity needs to start grasping these principles that are talked about in the Meier material. And because of our rapid overpopulation, we're destroying the natural world, and we're going to see in the third millennium firestorms and fire tornadoes, and we've seen those again and again. We saw the Rim Fire in Northern California last year. It burned 402 square miles. The Carlton Complex fire, which is the greatest fire in Washington State history, burned also about 400 square miles this year. Now, we saw the Funny River Fire, 193,000 acres burned in Alaska. We saw the polar vortex, a massive traffic jam that occurred in Atlanta because of freezing everywhere. We saw the Great Lakes freeze over completely so that none of the shipping could get through. We've abused this planet. We're paying the price because we've destroyed our forests, and the forests are the mediators of climate. And some of the things that are talked about, that we will have droughts, that we will have vast storms, rainstorms, firestorms, colder weather, landslides, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, floods, high tides. Millions of people will lose their life. Some will commit suicide. Some will turn to drugs. Some will act like wild beasts. All of this is described in the Goblet of Truth. And it's also because of our greed for profit, our corrupt leadership, our focus on materialism. We've lost touch with the creation. Our human connections are destroyed, and that's why I emphasize things like meditation. And we're also going to have difficulties in economy. And in Contact 213, it talks about the troubles even in Switzerland, for example. In one of Billy's contacts, an extraterrestrial named Quetzal says the following. He says, "Unfortunately, it looks very bleak. The coming time will bring that very many enterprises of large and small style will be dissolved or be driven into bankruptcy by mismanagement and over-indebtedness. Unfortunately, this will also apply to long-established firms and enterprises where the leaders will become irresponsible, and the leaders will give themselves exorbitant wealth, which they pay to themselves as compensations and settlements. More and more, these compensations will be into the millions and millions of dollars. And we see this happening today. So this is another one of these historical trends. And in Figu Bulletin 56, it says, in today's world in which the early anchored certain these virtues, love, peace, freedom, and harmony, as well as evolutionary knowledge and wisdom, all of these will break away. And all these good values will disintegrate more and more. And more wars will be stirred up through state powers. And many of these state powers are criminal in nature. So we're going to have problems like the Ukraine wars and these various difficulties. Here's a clip where a journalist was shot on the streets in Mariupol, Ukraine. I thought you might find this interesting.
Violence has once again hit the city of Mariupol in southeastern Ukraine. Video from the mayhem purportedly shows the army shooting into unarmed crowds of people celebrating Victory Day. RT's Irina Galushko is in Odessa and brings us the developments from the region.
If you look at the footage that we have already seen throughout the day, it's clear that there have been some civilians on the streets of the city. It is a Victory Day commemoration, not just in that city, but in a lot of places in southeastern Ukraine. Obviously, there have been some families out with children. We also have a report from an eyewitness describing the events as they have been unfolding in Mariupol.
I saw tanks and armored vehicles in Mariupol's main street, and they were heading towards the city council building. A lot of people were gathered there. There were also some people approaching the local interior minister building, and it looks like Ukraine's forces are shooting at the legs of those who are trying to come close to it.
Now that the building of the interior ministry has been set on fire, reportedly from the tank shells being fired at it. At that time, at the time of those reports, there also has been information that people could be inside that building. A cameraman working for Roughly Artist Video Agency has been shot through the stomach and wounded. Now, doctors say his life is out of danger at the moment, and he is expected to make a full recovery. However, listen to what this man describes has happened to the cameraman. The man has asked that we keep his identity unknown at this point.
Your correspondent was showing the armed people en masse that he was unarmed, trying to convince them that he was a journalist, that he was a member of the press. Then he suddenly decided to run across the street where we're on. A shot was heard and he fell down.
Exactly why the Ukrainian military has decided to carry out an offensive on the Victory Day, knowing full well that people are going to be on the street, and we're talking about civilians, women and children, is not yet clear.
That was RT's Irina Galushko.
In Contact 251, I think, well, this sounds a lot like Contact 215. World War III is said it will not be averted if man fails to become reasonable. That the war will begin with conventional weaponry that will escalate to nuclear, chemical, and biological warfare. The World War will begin in November of a specific year after 5 years of intensive effort are spent reaching this goal, which is preceded by 4 years of unspecified preparations. Should war actually break out, it will last 3 years and 11 months and will therefore end in October of the 4th year. By this time, Earth's northern hemisphere will be largely destroyed by nuclear fires and radioactive radiation that will annihilate the entire animal and plant world unless man sees to it that the prophecy proves itself to be just a prophecy without fulfilling itself. So we're living on the edge here. So I think we should take every effort to get in touch with our control of our spiritual life, because war's not an option. War's not an option in the modern world. The Ukrainians are very intelligent, hardworking people with modern weapons, just as the Russians are. And I want to play just some clips again from heavy clashes in the battle for Donetsk. So let's make sure that those sounds don't start occurring over here in the United States. That would be my goal. The Enoch prophecies say that monstrous forces will be created by science and will be released by the military forces and armies as well as by terrorists causing great destruction. That millions and even billions of people will be killed by acts of terrorism, by wars and civil wars, and finally in some parts of the world, every third human being, and in other places every fourth human being, will lose his or her life. Again, these things don't have to happen. If we get back in touch with our spiritual life, if we reconnect with nature, if we understand what the human spirit really is, if we understand what universal consciousness is, if we learn to once again feel the radiating love of creation, we don't have to go into warfare. We don't have to go into chaos. We can become a productive society. We can move towards higher technologies. We can reclaim our biosphere. We can start to undo some of the damage that we've done. By now I think we probably ought to be traveling to other star systems and other planets. In fact, there are more and more planets that could have life on them being discovered all the time. Here's a clip that talks about, it's called Kepler 186. It's an Earth-sized planet that probably has water.
It's not a clone of Earth, but for the first time, planet hunters think they have evidence of a planet about Earth's size that could have liquid water in orbit around another star. Kepler 186f, the outermost world of a 5-planet system, orbits about 3 times closer to its star than Earth is to the Sun. But that star, Kepler 186, is an M dwarf. It's much cooler than our bright Sun. So, scientists of the SETI Institute at NASA Ames Research Center are confident the new world is in the so-called habitable zone of that star.
So the Kepler mission, the Kepler telescope, is discovering these Earth-like planets all the time. Of course, they don't emphasize that on the very controlled mainstream media. Another interesting thing which is happening right now is this billionaire Elon Musk, the guy that built the Tesla motor car. He's working on plans to go to Mars, which I find very fascinating. I play part of
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And launch of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket as NASA turns to the private sector to resupply the International Space Station.
A future where we're a spacefaring civilization is a far more exciting and inspiring future than one where we are not.
Capture is confirmed.
Houston Station, looks like we got us at Dragon by the tail.
Our long-term goal is to be able to develop the technology to transport millions of people to Mars, which will preserve the future of humanity in the event of a calamity on Earth. I absolutely think we want to have a future where humanity is out there exploring the stars and where we have human civilization on multiple planets.
And as you know from the Meier material, if you've heard me talk about this before, we have been on multiple planets before. There were 3 planets in our solar system that supported life: Mars, Melona, and the Earth. And there were civilizations on Mars in the ancient past. There were civilizations on Melona in the ancient past. Melona at one time was actually the 3rd planet from the Sun, but that was before Venus was here. Let's pick back up with our clip.
Only about 0.3% of the cost of the rocket. The cost of our rocket is $60 million, but the cost of our propellant is only about $200,000. So if we're able to reuse the rockets, there could be a dramatic reduction in the cost of space flight.
And what inspired you to do this?
When I was a kid, I thought about what would most affect the future of humanity, and I think it's fair to say, and probably pretty obvious to most, that a future where we're a spacefaring civilization is a far more exciting and inspiring future than one where we are not. And even though in the Apollo era, when we sent astronauts to the moon and only a handful of people went to the moon, in effect we all went there vicariously.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Why is space exploration important? Shouldn't we be focusing on what's going on here?
I largely agree that we should have 99% plus of our energy focused on solving problems on Earth. But I think we need to preserve a small amount for a future beyond Earth. You can say, well, how much money should we spend on extending humanity into space? And certainly it should be far less than we spend on healthcare, but maybe more than we spend on lipstick. And I like lipstick, no knock on that. I'm a fan of it. I'm just saying that it's probably somewhere in between those two numbers, and probably towards lower end actually in terms of expenditures.
So you said that your goal is to eventually take millions of people to Mars.
Millions, yeah.
But isn't that going to be expensive? How are people going to be able to afford that?
The key threshold, I think.
See, this is very interesting. In some aspects, we're going back to where we've already been. According to the Meier material, on Earth, we have the remnants of 5 different kinds of human beings who are of extraterrestrial origin. People here from Mars, Melona, from the constellation Lyra Vega, and from the Sirius system. Now, technically advanced humans from the Sirius system, called the Creator Overlords, created a new human race that had a lifespan of 100 years. These people were genetically engineered to fight wars for these people from the Sirius system. But eventually, these genetically manipulated people had to flee their homes in the Sirius system. And they came here with benefactors, let's say, people who were directly descended from the Lyra Vega people who didn't have this genetic manipulation. They also accompanied them to Mars. And these masses of diverse races found refuge on the planets Mars and Melona Phaeton, and they constructed cities and an entire civilization. So it's very interesting that Elon Musk, his goal is to go back to, in a sense, where we've already been.
Study engineering and science, and actually I'd say particularly engineering, because engineering is the closest thing to magic that exists in the real world. Engineering is creating some new device that never existed before, and that can do things today that would be considered magic hundreds of years ago. It's pretty amazing what we can do. We can create images, and do holograms and things like that, and all of these things would have gotten you burnt at the stake 300 years ago.
What is the next gold rush? What's the next .com for young people? What industry should they be looking into?
Well, I think there are opportunities in energy, sustainable energy, in artificial intelligence, in genetics. Those are probably the three big areas.
And what advice do you have for young people who are trying to get their startups off the ground?
I think that the thing to do is to try to create a demonstration article. Everything works on PowerPoint, but if you actually have the physical item or the software, some demonstration software, that's much more convincing to people than a PowerPoint presentation or any business plan.
Do you have an intern?
Anyway, folks, I think we'll probably end the show here tonight. I really appreciate all the people that came. I want to thank After Dark Radio, Judith Williams, Carrie Collision, Soul Connection, and a couple anonymous guests that we have in the chat room as well. And we have some interesting comments flying around in the chat room there from Judith and from Soul Connection. I'm glad you guys are interested in this material. It's very fascinating to me. Always looking forward to hear from you guys. I appreciate everyone that showed up this evening. Keep coming back to the site. We're going to try to keep doing shows on a regular basis and keep getting this information out. Have a good evening. Thank you very much for listening, folks.